found my daughter in the woods outside of town, barely alive. My mother-in-law did this. She said I have dirty blood, the girl whispered, struggling to breathe. I drove her home, and later I wrote to my older brother. Now it is our turn. It is time to use what our grandfather taught us. This is a story based on real events. Hello, my dears. Put aside your chores for a minute. I want to tell a story that will help you look at your loved ones in a new way. Write in the comments where you are tuning in from. We wish you pleasant listening. October turned out to be cold. The dampness penetrated everywhere, creeping under my jacket, forcing me to wrap myself in an old wool scarf. I was returning from the farmer's market, where I had bought the last apples of the season for jam. My old Chevy, a faithful assistant for 15 years, hummed with effort on the broken dirt road. In the thick twilight of the autumn evening, the road was barely visible, but I knew every pothole, every turn. These places had been my home all my life. I am Ruby Vance, a widow, a mother, and a grandmother. Many people in our county know me. I worked as a nurse at the rural hospital and retired 5 years ago. Now I tend to my garden, bake pies for my grandchildren, and make preserves for the winter. The ordinary life of an ordinary woman. Although people rarely called me ordinary. With my black hair, hardly touched by gray, even at 56, my dark skin, and my deep, dark eyes, I always stood out here in the rural backwoods. Bad blood, they whispered behind my back, sometimes with admiration, more often with caution. And they were right. My grandmother was a proud black woman who married a white man, my grandfather, against her family's will. This story was passed down in the family like a legend about a great love that conquered prejudice. The phone in my jacket pocket erupted with a shrill ring, making me startle. It was an old push-button device, reliable, with a powerful battery that didn't fail even in freezing temperatures. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Hello? I pressed the phone to my ear, slowing down on a particularly bumpy stretch. Ruby Vance? A male voice, unfamiliar, out of breath. Yes, that's me. You need to come urgently. The woods behind the old quarry. Do you know where that is? My heart skipped a beat. I'm Sam, a hunter. I live across the river. I found your daughter. She's in bad shape. Very bad. She has her ID on her. Your number is listed as an emergency contact. The ground fell out from under my feet. I braked sharply. The car skidded on the wet clay. What's wrong with her? What happened? Beaten badly. She's conscious but barely speaking. I called 911, but it'll take them a long time to get out here. Hurry. I turned the Chevy around right in the middle of the road, almost driving into the ditch. My hands were shaking, but my head was working clearly. The old quarry. That was about 7 miles north along a logging road. Only one thing was spinning in my head. Olivia, my baby girl, just hold on. My daughter is 32 years old. Beautiful, smart, stubborn. At 24, she married Gavin, the heir to a large construction company. She moved to the state capital, into a luxurious mansion. She rarely called, and visited even less. She always answered my questions about her life evasively. Everything is fine, Mom, don't worry. And I pretended to believe her, although my mother's heart sensed it. Not everything was smooth in her golden cage. The road to the quarry wound between thinning aspens and birches. The car shook over the potholes. I could barely manage the steering, but I didn't slow down. Thoughts raced through my head. Who could have beaten Olivia? A robbery? It couldn't be. Gavin always seemed calm, polite. True, his mother, Lucille Sterling, looked at me like empty space and viewed our family and our race as a stain she wanted to wipe off her precious son. Around the bend, the old quarry appeared, an abandoned sandy pit overgrown with young pines. A battered pickup truck stood on the shoulder with its doors open. A middle-aged man in a camouflage jacket was shifting from foot to foot nearby. I braked, jumped out of the car, forgetting to turn off the engine. Where is she? My voice cracked. There. He waved his hand toward the tree line. About 100 yards. I put my jacket under her and left a thermos of tea. I wanted to carry her, but I was afraid. What if there are fractures? I rushed in the indicated direction. My feet got stuck in the soil soaked after the rain. Branches whipped my face. I stumbled, fell, got up, and ran again. Something light appeared between the trees. At first, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was matted with blood and dirt, her face swollen. There was a huge bruise under her eye. Her light coat from an expensive designer had turned into dirty rags. She lay on her side, curled up, just as she did in childhood when she was sick. "Olivia, baby." I dropped to my knees beside her, afraid to touch. She opened her eyes slightly. One was almost completely swollen shut. The other looked cloudy, unfocused. Her lips trembled in a weak smile, immediately replaced by a grimace of pain. "Mom, I'm here, honey, I'm here." I gently stroked her head, avoiding the obvious injuries. "The ambulance is already coming. Just hold on, little one." She tried to sit up but groaned in pain. I noticed one arm was twisted unnaturally, a fracture, without a doubt. Who did this? My voice sounded unexpectedly firm. She licked her split lips and coughed. I helped her take a sip from the thermos the hunter had left. The warm tea seemed to give her strength. "Lucille Sterling," she whispered so quietly I could barely hear. "Your mother-in-law?" I couldn't believe my ears. Olivia nodded, wincing in pain. "She said my dirty blood, a disgrace to their family." Something snapped inside me. A rage I had never experienced before flooded my entire being. I knew Lucille despised us, despised black people. But to beat a defenseless woman, her own daughter-in-law? "Mom." Olivia grabbed my hand. "No hospital. They have people everywhere. Home." "What are you saying, honey? You need medical help." "No." There was panic in her eyes. "He will cover for her. Gavin is always on her side." I froze. Her husband wouldn't protect her from his own mother. But this was madness. Then I remembered Grandpa Nick, my father's father, a Vietnam vet, a man with an iron will and a piercing gaze. He often said, "Ruby, if a situation seems insane, look for what isn't visible on the surface." At that moment, the wail of a siren was heard somewhere in the distance. The ambulance. I had to decide immediately. What happened, Olivia? Why did she do this? My daughter swallowed, wincing from pain. "I found documents in Gavin's safe. She's stealing money from the charity foundation, millions meant for sick children." Every word was difficult for her. I asked her directly. She turned pale, then suggested we drive out of town to look at a new plot of land, said she would explain everything. The picture was gradually coming together. Olivia had discovered something compromising, likely by accident. And Lucille Sterling, the director of a large charity foundation, a respected lady in the city, decided to get rid of an inconvenient witness. By whose hands? Mercenaries or herself? "Herself," Olivia whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "She drove me here in her SUV, said it didn't matter. No one would believe me, not with my background." The siren was getting closer. The medics would be here soon. The right thing would be to send my daughter to the hospital, call the police, file a report. But if her husband's family really had such connections, if he was on his mother's side, they could silence Olivia forever. The decision came instantly, as if a switch flipped in my head. "Did the hunter see who brought you?" I asked. "No, she left. She thought I would die here from the cold and injuries." I got to my feet and ran back to the road. The hunter was still there, smoking, leaning against his truck. "Sam, right?" I approached him. "Did you see who dropped her off?" "No." He shook his head. "I was hunting mushrooms. Stumbled upon her by accident. It was already getting dark." "Listen." I spoke quickly, afraid the ambulance would arrive before I could explain everything. "My daughter is in danger. This is a family matter. I'm taking her home. I'll provide aid myself. I'm a medic." He frowned, looking at me doubtfully. "Lady, she needs serious help. She might have internal injuries." "I know." I lowered my voice. "Her mother-in-law did this. She has connections everywhere, including the hospital. If Olivia ends up there, they will silence her, or worse." His eyes widened in surprise. Then understanding appeared in them. "You want me to?" "Tell the medics it was a false alarm, that you made a mistake, and I'll take my daughter." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "I feel you aren't lying, but if she gets worse..." I'm a nurse with 30 years of experience, I repeated, and I am a mother. He nodded once more, then started brushing off his jacket. Go to your daughter. I'll handle the ambulance. I squeezed his hand in a silent thank you and ran back to Olivia. The wail of the siren was becoming louder. Let's go, honey. I carefully helped her sit up. We'll get to the car now and the ambulance. She could barely hold her head up. I canceled the call, I lied. We'll handle it ourselves. She didn't argue. I gently helped her up, threw her healthy arm over my shoulder. Olivia groaned in pain but moved forward, leaning on me. We walked slowly to the road, avoiding the spot where the hunter remained. Through the trees, the flashing lights of the ambulance were already visible. We reached my Chevy. I settled my daughter into the front seat, fastened the seatbelt, trying not to touch her injured arm. I went around the car, got behind the wheel, and quietly pulled away. I didn't turn on the headlights until we had driven a sufficient distance from the quarry. That's it, I said, when we drove out onto a more decent paved road. Home now. Olivia closed her eyes, leaning back against the seat. In the dim light of the dashboard, her face looked gray. Mom, they won't stop, she whispered. Now I know too much. We'll come up with something. I tried to make my voice sound confident, although inside everything was shaking with fear and rage. The main thing is you're alive. Olivia suddenly grabbed my hand, forcing me to loosen my grip on the steering wheel for a moment. Mom, I have proof, she said unexpectedly firmly. The documents? I managed to photograph them on my phone before we drove off. My heart leaped. Where is the phone? In my bag. She didn't take it. Apparently, she decided it would look like a robbery. I nodded. My thoughts were working with crystal clarity. We needed to hide Olivia where they wouldn't look for her, treat her wounds, contact someone who could help deal with this situation. An image floated up in my memory immediately. Marcus, my older brother. Ex-military, just like our grandfather. Tough. A man of few words, reliable as a rock. He lived in the neighboring county, worked for a private security firm, and unlike me, hadn't lost touch with the skills Grandpa had taught us. Olivia, I turned to my daughter, you have to tell me everything from the beginning. But first, we will contact Uncle Marcus. Remember him? She nodded weakly. The one who taught me to shoot a slingshot. Exactly. I tried to smile. He will help us. We drove in the dark along deserted country roads. Ahead was my house, wooden, old but sturdy, and in the attic, under a layer of dust, stood a trunk that my brother and I had brought after Grandpa died. A trunk with things that might prove more useful than I had thought all these years. I took out my phone and, without slowing down, typed a message to my brother. Marcus, need your help. Remember what Grandpa Nick taught us? Now is our turn. We reached my house on the outskirts of the village when night had finally taken over. The stars spilled out onto the sky, bright and cold. The October air smelled of decaying leaves and the first frosts. The old log house met us with silence. I helped Olivia out of the car, almost carrying her onto the porch. She could barely move her legs, but held on stoically. My girl had always been strong. In childhood, falling off a bicycle, she would get up silently, wipe her knees, and ride on. But now even she was struggling. Just a moment, honey, just a moment. I sat her on the sofa in the living room and rushed to the fireplace. It was chilly in the house. I had left in the morning and hadn't had time to heat it. I skillfully started a fire with prepared wood chips and birch logs. Soon the fire crackled merrily, casting reflections on my daughter's pale face. Let's look at your wounds, I said, turning on the table lamp. In the bright light, Olivia looked even worse. The bruise under her eye was rapidly turning black. Her lip was split, a deep scratch on her cheek. I carefully helped her take off her coat. Every movement caused her to groan. Under her thin blouse, bruises were visible. Her right arm hung limply. Fracture, I stated, gently palpating the wrist. Most likely simple, without displacement. Need to immobilize it. My first aid kit had everything necessary. 30 years working as a nurse weren't for nothing. I treated all visible wounds with antiseptic, applied a splint to her wrist, gave her painkillers and anti-inflammatories. "Thank you, Mom," Olivia whispered when I finished. "You always know what to do." I smiled bitterly. Did I? My only daughter lay before me, beaten, broken, and the enemy wasn't some street thug, but a powerful businesswoman with massive connections. What could I oppose against her money and influence? The phone, I remembered. You mentioned evidence. Olivia pointed to her bag, expensive leather with gold hardware. Inside, I found the latest model iPhone in a cracked case. The screen, fortunately, was intact. "Code 1989, Olivia said. "The year you moved into this house." I unlocked the phone, involuntarily noting that for her password, she chose a date important to both of us. Despite the luxurious life in her husband's mansion, she hadn't forgotten her roots. "Gallery," she prompted. "Folder documents for Gavin." I found the folder. Dozens of photos of accounting reports, payment orders, contracts. At first glance, ordinary business papers, but I understood that Olivia had seen something important in them, something for which Lucille Sterling had taken such a risk. "Explain what's here," I asked, sitting down next to my daughter. "The Hope Foundation," Olivia began quietly. "Lucille is its director and founder. Every year, tens of millions of dollars pass through the foundation for the treatment of sick children, for supporting nursing homes, for building playgrounds. Everything official, everything transparent." She paused to sip water from the cup I handed her. 2 weeks ago, Gavin asked me to help with documents for the foundation's annual report. He's on the board of trustees, but honestly, never really looked into it. Just signed where his mom pointed. I nodded. That was in Gavin's spirit. Handsome, charming, but an absolutely spineless man, living his whole life at his mother's direction. I started going through the documents and noticed something strange. Large sums, from 5 to 15 million, were regularly transferred to accounts of firms with names like Consulting Inc., or Business Analytics for consulting services, legal support, analytics. But there were no detailed reports on these services, and when I looked for information on the firms themselves, shell companies, I guessed, created for money laundering. Exactly. Olivia nodded. I checked the databases. They were all registered shortly before receiving money from the foundation. The founders, people with lost passports, deceased, or completely unaware of their participation. Classic straw men. And the money? The money went to accounts in offshore zones. "And you asked your mother-in-law about this?" I shook my head. "Olivia, didn't you realize how dangerous that was?" "I realized." She smiled weakly with broken lips. But I decided to give her a chance to explain. I'm a member of the family, after all. Thought maybe there was some reasonable explanation. I sighed. My naive, kind girl always believed in the best in people, even when the evidence spoke to the contrary. "And what did she say?" "Nothing." Olivia grimaced in pain. At first she turned pale, then pulled herself together. Said I misunderstood everything, that it was a complex financial scheme for tax optimization, completely legal, and then suggested we drive out of town. Said she would explain everything in detail, without prying ears. "And you went?" "Yes." She lowered her eyes. Stupid, right? But I thought she was still my husband's mother, the grandmother of my future child. I froze. "You." Olivia nodded, covering her stomach with her healthy hand. 12 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet, wanted to wait for the second trimester. Gavin was so happy. My heart squeezed with pain and rage. Lucille Sterling beat a pregnant woman, her own daughter-in-law, who was carrying her grandchild, and all because of money. She knew about the baby? Yes. Olivia swallowed. I told her in the car. I thought it would stop her. But she laughed, said that with my dirty blood I have no place in their family, that my child would spoil their impeccable lineage. I closed my eyes to hold back tears of rage. My grandmother, despite the color of her skin and the prejudice she faced, was a highly educated woman, played the piano, and raised a family of patriots. And this arrogant upstart. She stopped the car near the woods, Olivia continued in a quiet voice. Said she wanted to show me the plot they were buying. We got out, and then I didn't even have time to understand what was happening. She hit me with something heavy on the head, a tire iron from the trunk, I think, and then... She trembled, remembering. She was like a lunatic, kept repeating about my blood, about how I wanted to destroy their family, disgrace them, take their money. I hugged my daughter, trying not to touch the injured places. She buried her face in my shoulder and cried soundlessly. She would have killed me if not for a phone call, whispered Olivia. Someone called her. She got distracted, started saying she was already coming, that everything was in order, and then just got in the car and left me to die from the cold and wounds. The phone in my pocket vibrated, a message from my brother. Leaving now. We'll be there by morning. Don't call anyone. Turn off the phones. They can track them. I felt a surge of relief. Marcus was always a reliable rear guard. If anyone knew what to do in such a situation, it was him. Your phone needs to be turned off, I told Olivia. And mine too, in the car. She suddenly remembered. Under the seat. Gavin insisted on repairing your Chevy at their service center 3 months ago. They could have... I understood immediately. A tracker. They had been watching me all this time. Wait here. I got up and headed for the door. Outside, it had gotten even colder. The stars seemed especially bright in the moonless sky. I crouched down near the car, shined the flashlight from my phone under the chassis, and indeed, a small black box attached to the frame under the driver's seat. I ripped it off, examined it. A professional GPS tracker. Returning to the house, I put the device on the table. You were right, I told my daughter. They were watching me. They know where you live. Olivia tried to sit up straighter but winced in pain. We need to leave here. I shook my head. No, that would be logical, but that's what they expect. We will stay here. Marcus will arrive soon, and we will decide what to do next. I took the battery out of Olivia's mobile, then turned off my phone as well. We could no longer be tracked. In the meantime, I walked over to the old dresser and pulled out the bottom drawer. We'll need this. From under a stack of old sweaters, I pulled out a worn holster with a pistol. My grandfather's service 1911, which he had officially registered back in the day. I kept the permit current, although I hadn't taken the weapon out once in all these years. Do you know how? Olivia opened her eyes wide. Yes. I checked the magazine, the safety. Grandpa taught me, and Marcus refreshed my skills a couple of years ago. I placed the pistol on the table next to the tracker. 2 symbols of our new situation. We were prey, but prey that could fight back. Olivia leaned back on the pillows I had placed behind her back. Her face was exhausted, but something new appeared in her eyes. Not just fear, but determination. We need a plan, she said. I have the documents, but that's not enough. They can deny everything. Say I forged them or misinterpreted them. Marcus will help. I sat down next to her. He knows people who have access to databases. If we can trace the movement of money, it's not that simple. Olivia shook her head. The scheme is complex. Shell companies, offshore accounts. It takes time and resources we don't have. Then we'll have to act differently. I looked thoughtfully out the window. Behind the glass, the darkness thickened, becoming almost tangible. Somewhere out there, 100 miles away, in a luxurious mansion on the riverbank, sat a woman who tried to kill my daughter, who despised us for our race, who thought she could go unpunished thanks to money and connections. Tell me everything you know about Lucille Sterling, I asked, about her habits, fears, weaknesses. Why? Olivia shuddered. You're not going to... No, I shook my head. We won't stoop to her level, but we need to understand who we are dealing with. Olivia looked at me for a long time, then nodded. She fears exposure more than anything in the world, she began. Her reputation is her god. The charity foundation, social projects, interviews in glossy magazines. It's all her way of showing herself in a certain light. In reality... What about her husband, your father-in-law? Arthur Sterling. Olivia laughed joylessly. A big businessman, head of a holding company. In public, a model family man, father, and husband. In reality, he lives separately, has a mistress younger than me, and never interferes in his wife's affairs, provided she doesn't create problems for the business. And Gavin, your husband? Olivia's face twisted with pain, and I realized it wasn't a physical injury. Mom, he loves me, honestly, but he will always be on his mother's side. He grew fused with her by an umbilical cord that no one cut. He's 40 years old, and he still calls her to find out what tie to wear to a meeting. I squeezed her healthy hand. Is that why you don't want to go back? Yes. She lowered her eyes. If I end up in the hospital, Gavin will take me home, and there Lucille will finish what she started, and no one will stop her. A heavy sigh escaped my chest. My girl had fallen into a golden cage from which she could not escape now. We need to turn to someone Lucille can't silence, I said, thinking aloud. Someone she fears or cannot control. Olivia thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. Arthur Sterling, she whispered. Her husband. She can do whatever she wants as long as it doesn't harm the business. But if a scandal with the foundation surfaces, it will hit the holding company's reputation, I picked up, and then he will intervene. Yes, Olivia nodded. He's not the most pleasant person, but he's a pragmatist. If choosing between his wife and business, he will choose business, I finished. Good thought. But how to get to him? Surely he's surrounded by security and secretaries. I have his personal number. Olivia smiled weakly. Gavin called him in front of me once. I memorized it. Never thought it would come in handy. I nodded. The plan was beginning to take shape. But first, let's wait for Marcus. I looked at the clock. He had another 6 hours to drive. You need to rest. I helped my daughter lie down more comfortably, adjusted the pillows. Her eyelids were growing heavy. The effect of painkillers and the tension of the last few hours was taking its toll. Mom, she caught my hand as I was about to leave the room. Thank you. For what, daughter? For not asking why I married such a weakling. She smiled bitterly. For not saying, I warned you. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. We all make mistakes, honey. The main thing is to fix them before it's too late. When she fell asleep, I went out onto the porch. The night was cold and clear. The stars, bright and dispassionate, looked at me from above. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I inhaled the frosty air deeply. I thought about my grandmother, Zora, a proud black woman who, despite the strict social codes of her time, lived with her head held high, about her pride and strength, which she passed on to my mother, and from her to me. About the dirty blood Lucille despised so much. Today that blood boiled, and it would rage until justice triumphed. Not for revenge, but for the protection of my daughter and her unborn child. The tracker I removed from the car was still working, blinking a small red light. I put it on a stump near the house. Let them think I'm here. Let them come. I will be ready. And the baby? She instinctively covered her stomach with her hand. Seems to be okay. No bleeding, no severe pain in the lower abdomen, but a doctor's examination is needed. Marcus exchanged glances with me. We both understood how risky going to the local hospital was, but leaving Olivia without medical help was impossible. I have a doctor friend in Springfield, said Marcus, referring to his time in the service. He can be trusted, and he'll come here. No need to go anywhere. Thank you, Olivia said quietly, then suddenly tensed. The phone. They can listen to your conversations. Don't worry. Marcus showed her new burner phones. We'll use only these, and I'll call the doctor from a payphone in the next town over. He walked to the window, lifted the edge of the curtain. We can't stay here, he said, peering into the dawn. The house is too open. The woods come right up to the north side. Ideal position for observation and attack, but where do we go? I looked around the room in confusion. Can't go to a hotel. Need ID. To friends? We'll put them in danger. Grandpa had a hunting cabin, Marcus said thoughtfully. About 12 miles from here, deep in the woods. Remember? I nodded. a small log cabin on the shore of a forest lake where Grandpa took us fishing. I hadn't been there in 15 years, but I remembered the place well. You can only get there on foot or by an off-roader, Marcus continued. No roads, only forest trails. Ideal hideout. But, Olivia, she won't be able to walk. We'll take your Chevy, he decided. We'll just leave the tracker here in case they are tracking the car via satellite, and we'll leave at twilight to make it harder to be seen. I agreed. The plan was risky, but logical. The cabin was far from civilization. No one would look for us there. What about the evidence? Asked Olivia. The foundation documents? Marcus sat down next to her and carefully studied the photos on the phone. Impressive, he admitted. But you're right, this isn't enough. We need confirmation from independent sources. Bank statements, registry data, confirmation of the shell company's activity. Do you have access to such things? Olivia asked hopefully. Marcus smiled mysteriously. Not me, but I know people who do. Former squad mates who now work in structures with access to databases. For a certain fee, they can help. How much do you need? I was already calculating how much money I had saved up. Don't worry about the money. Marcus waved it off. I have savings, and this is an investment in our family's future. He took a laptop out of his bag and turned it on. Offline, he explained. Doesn't connect to the internet directly. Safe. While Marcus worked, I attended to Olivia, helped her wash up, changed bandages, prepared a light breakfast. Her condition was stable, but the bruises had acquired a gruesome purple-green hue. Looking at my daughter's battered face was physically painful. Mom, she said quietly when we were alone in the kitchen, I'm scared. I know, honey. I gently hugged her. But we'll handle it. We always have. Not for myself, she shook her head. For the baby. And because of you. Lucille won't stop. She has too much to lose if the truth comes out. That's exactly why we must act quickly. I squeezed her hand resolutely. Marcus worked all day, calling, writing, analyzing information. He went out a couple of times to call from a payphone. He returned with news. Doc Wallace will come tomorrow morning, he reported. In the meantime, there's something interesting. He spread out printouts he had brought with him on the table. The Hope Foundation has existed for 7 years, he began. During this time, about $300 million passed through it. Most of it from large corporations that reduce their taxable base this way. Seems legal. Money goes to charity, companies get tax breaks, and a positive image. But in reality, I asked, in reality, about 60% of the funds go nowhere. Marcus pointed to a diagram he had drawn. Shell companies, fake contracts, inflated estimates, classic money laundering scheme. And no one noticed for 7 years? I couldn't believe it. Someone noticed, Marcus said grimly. 2 years ago, a journalist started an investigation. A month later, he got into a car accident. Miraculously survived, but is now paralyzed. The investigation naturally stopped. Olivia turned even paler. I didn't know. How could you know? Marcus shrugged. They didn't write about it in the papers. Information from private sources. So what now? I asked. Go to the police with this data? Marcus shook his head. Useless. The family has too much influence. The report will get lost, evidence will disappear, and you'll be in even greater danger. Then what? I was starting to lose patience. The plan remains the same, said Marcus firmly. We go directly to Arthur Sterling, but now we'll have more trump cards. He pointed to the laptop screen. My friends found something else interesting. Besides the charity foundation, Lucille has accounts in foreign banks. The amounts are impressive, about 2 million euros. The origin of this money is dubious. Does her husband know? Asked Olivia. Judging by everything, no. Marcus shook his head. The accounts are opened in Lucille's maiden name, carefully masked, but my guys found them. So she's not just stealing from the foundation, I said thoughtfully. She's also hiding money from her husband, preparing a golden parachute. Looks like it, Marcus agreed, and this fact might be decisive. Arthur Sterling might turn a blind eye to fraud with the foundation. After all, it's donors' money, not his. But personal betrayal, he won't forgive. Exactly, Olivia finished for him. He's a man of the old school. For him, family is primarily a business partnership. Loyalty is above all. Evening was falling. We were preparing for departure. Marcus checked the car, made sure the tracker was securely fastened to the stump by the house. I packed the essentials, warm clothes, medicines, food. Olivia was silent and focused. "Time to go," Marcus said when it got dark outside. "I'll drive. You both get in the back seat. Duck down when we drive through the village." We left the house. The air was cold, smelling of pine resin and approaching snow. I helped Olivia into the car, covered her with a blanket. Marcus checked the pistol I gave him and hid it under his jacket. "Everything will be fine," he said, starting the engine. "Grandpa didn't teach us survival for nothing." The Chevy quietly moved off. We didn't turn on the headlights until we hit the logging road. I looked back at the house that had been my refuge for so many years. Now it looked lonely and vulnerable. When we had driven a couple of miles, the sound of a helicopter engine was heard in the distance. Marcus instantly pulled off the road and killed the engine. "Get down," he commanded. We froze, listening to the night. The helicopter was approaching. Its searchlight slid over the treetops. They were looking for us. "They wouldn't use a helicopter," whispered Olivia. "Too noticeable. It's probably the National Guard or something." Marcus nodded, but remained tense. The helicopter flew a mile or so away from us and disappeared over the horizon. "Let's go," Marcus said, starting the engine again. "The hardest part starts soon." The road was getting worse. The Chevy bounced over roots and bumps, climbing deeper into the woods. Olivia winced in pain with every jolt, but didn't complain. "Just a little more," Marcus encouraged her. "We'll be there soon." After an hour of driving through the impassable woods, we saw the dark silhouette of the hunting cabin against the night sky. A small log structure standing on the shore of a black-as-ink forest lake. "We're here." Marcus exhaled with relief, turning off the engine. I helped Olivia out of the car. She stood leaning on me and breathing deeply in the night air. "How quiet," she whispered. "No city sounds." "We'll be safe here," Marcus said, opening the creaky door of the cabin, "at least until we're ready to strike." Inside, it smelled of dampness and old wood. Marcus lit a kerosene lamp he brought with him. The light snatched a simple setting from the darkness: a wooden table, a couple of benches, a potbelly stove, narrow bunks against the wall. "Not the Ritz-Carlton, of course," Marcus chuckled, "but it'll do for our purposes." I sat Olivia on a bench, draped a jacket over her shoulders. She looked exhausted, but determination read in her eyes. "What's next?" she asked. Marcus started unloading the brought items. "Doc Wallace arrives tomorrow morning. He'll examine you and the baby, and in the meantime, I'll prepare our meeting with Arthur Sterling." "How will you force him to meet with us?" I asked. "People like him don't just meet people off the street." Marcus smiled mysteriously. "I have a plan he won't be able to ignore." He took a small satellite phone out of his bag. "Tomorrow we send him a message with photos of the documents and an offer to meet. And believe me, he will agree." I looked at my brother with admiration. Grandpa would be proud of him, proud of both of us. We didn't break, didn't surrender. We acted exactly as he taught us, calmly, methodically, thinking through every step. Marcus started firing up the stove. Soon it became warm in the cabin. I helped Olivia lie down on the bunks, covered her with a blanket, gave her painkillers. "Sleep, honey," I said, stroking her hair. "Tomorrow is a hard day." When she fell asleep, Marcus and I sat by the stove, looking at the fire through the cracks in the iron door. "Do you understand what we're doing?" I asked quietly. "We're standing up against one of the most powerful families in the state. They have money, connections, power." "And we have the truth," Marcus answered simply, "and determination." "That might not be enough," I shook my head. "And we have something else they don't," he added, throwing a log into the stove. "That black blood she spoke of so contemptuously." I smiled, remembering Grandma Zora, her pride, her resilience, her ability to survive where others gave up. You know, I think Grandpa didn't marry a black woman by accident, Marcus said thoughtfully. He, a soldier, a man of the system, chose a woman who had to live knowing the system wasn't built for her, evading the hate, finding loopholes where others saw solid walls. Do you think that blood really means something? I asked. I think we are a product of both worlds, he replied. We have Grandpa's methodical nature, his systemic approach, and Grandma's intuition, her ability to think outside the box, to see what is hidden from others. The fire in the stove crackled, casting bizarre shadows on the walls of the cabin. We sat in silence, each immersed in our own thoughts. Ahead was the decisive day. We need to sleep, Marcus finally said. We'll need all our strength tomorrow. I nodded and moved to the bunks where Olivia was sleeping. Didn't want to leave her alone even for a minute. I'll take the first watch, Marcus said, taking out the pistol. He sat by the window, looking into the darkness of the forest. His profile, sharp and resolute, reminded me of Grandpa. The same straight nose, the same fold between the eyebrows. I lay down next to my daughter, listening to her breathing. She slept restlessly, sometimes starting and moaning quietly. Everything will be fine, I promised her mentally. We will protect you and the baby, whatever the cost. With this thought, I fell into an anxious sleep in which I found my daughter again and again, beaten and bloody in the cold woods. I was awakened by a quiet knock at the door. I jumped up, automatically grabbing the pistol that lay nearby. Marcus was already standing at the entrance, tense, ready for action. "Who is it?" he asked quietly. "Doc Wallace." A calm male voice answered. "Marcus Vance called?" My brother relaxed, but didn't put the pistol away. "Which regiment, Wallace?" he asked. 82nd Airborne, the voice answered immediately. "Operation Wolfpack." Marcus nodded and opened the door. On the threshold stood a stocky man of about 50 in a field jacket and with a battered medical bag in his hand. His gray hair was cut short, and his face was furrowed with wrinkles of a man who had seen a lot. "Come in, Wallace." Marcus shook his hand. "Thanks for coming." "For you?" "Any time." The doctor entered and looked around the room. His gaze stopped on the sleeping Olivia. "This the patient?" I nodded and went to my daughter, gently waking her. "Olivia, this is the doctor. He's going to examine you." Doc Wallace was a man of few words and businesslike. He carefully examined all of Olivia's wounds, checked her pupils, measured her blood pressure and pulse. Then he took a small portable ultrasound machine out of his bag. "Army tech," he explained, noticing my surprised look. "For field conditions, not as precise as in a hospital, but will show the basics." He gently ran the sensor over Olivia's stomach, peering into the small screen. His face was focused, and I waited for the verdict with anxiety. "Heartbeat is present," he finally said. "Stable. The placenta hasn't detached." "You got lucky, young lady." Olivia started crying, quietly, with relief. I squeezed her hand. "And what about the other injuries?" asked Marcus. "Wrist fracture. Non-displaced." Wallace checked the splint I had applied. "Good fixation. Concussion of moderate severity. Bruises, hematomas, abrasions. 2 ribs broken, but lungs not punctured. Ideally needs hospitalization, but..." He looked around the cabin, understanding that was impossible. He took several packages of medicine out of his bag. "Painkillers compatible with pregnancy, anti-inflammatories, vitamins, everything safe to take in your condition." He handed the medicine to Olivia. "Bed rest for at least a week and no sudden movements." "Thank you, doctor," Olivia said quietly. Wallace nodded, then took Marcus aside. They spoke quietly, but I heard anyway. "This wasn't a random attack," the doctor said. "The blows were delivered methodically. Someone wanted to cause maximum harm, but not kill immediately." "To make her suffer," Marcus nodded grimly. "Exactly." Wallace shook his head. "Animal cruelty, especially considering the pregnancy." "We'll deal with this," said Marcus firmly. "Thanks for coming." If it gets worse, call immediately." The doctor shook his hand. "And be careful. I passed by your house in town. There are people watching, not locals." Marcus and I exchanged glances. So they were already searching. When the doctor left, Marcus immediately sat at the laptop. "We need to act faster," he said. "Since they are already at the house, they will soon start expanding the search perimeter." "What are you going to do?" I asked, changing the cold compress on Olivia's forehead. "Send a message to Arthur Sterling," he answered, without looking up from the screen. "Right now." He worked for about an hour, then showed us the result. It was an email with attached photos of the documents Olivia had taken, as well as bank statements obtained by his friends. The text stated the essence of the matter concisely and to the point. Fraud with the charity foundation, secret accounts abroad, assault on a pregnant woman. "We are not making any demands," explained Marcus, "just offering to meet. Today at 6:00 p.m., the Old Park Diner in the city." "Why there?" asked Olivia. "That's in the center of town." "Exactly why," Marcus nodded. "A public place. He won't be able to try anything against us, and we'll have the advantage. We know his face, but he doesn't know ours." "No, he won't come alone," I objected. "People like that always have security." "I know," Marcus smiled. "And I'll have my own people. Former squad mates, 3 guys, combat tested." He sent the email through a secure connection. "Now we wait for an answer," he said, closing the laptop. The answer came 40 minutes later. Short, businesslike. "We'll be at the designated place at the designated time. Alone. You come without an entourage, too." Marcus chuckled. "Of course he won't be alone, and neither will we." "I have to go with you," Olivia suddenly said, trying to sit up. "Don't even think about it." I gently laid her back down. "You need rest." "Mom, this is my battle." She pressed her lips together stubbornly, wincing in pain. "I have to be there." "It's our shared battle," said Marcus firmly. "But your task right now is to protect yourself and the baby. We'll handle it." Olivia wanted to object, but suddenly turned pale and grabbed her stomach. I got scared, but she shook her head reassuringly. "It's fine, just kicked." "See?" I stroked her hand. "Even the little one tells you to stay here." By noon, Marcus left again. Needed to meet with friends, discuss the action plan. He left me one of the pistols and strictly forbade leaving the cabin. "If anyone approaches, shoot immediately," he said before leaving. "Don't try to find out who it is." I nodded. In 30 years, I had never shot at a person, but I knew I could if it threatened my daughter's life. Olivia and I were left alone. She dozed most of the time, exhausted by pain and stress. I sat by the window, watching the forest, and thinking about how strangely life had turned. Just 3 days ago, I was a simple retiree, a former nurse who made jam and knitted socks for grandkids. And today I'm sitting with a gun in my hands, ready to defend my daughter from powerful people who want her dead. But in reality, I was never just a retiree. The blood of a soldier grandfather and a resilient grandmother always flowed in my veins. I had just forgotten about it in the habitual routine of peaceful life. Marcus returned at twilight. He was collected and focused. "Everything is ready," he said. "My people are already at the diner, 1 at the bar, 2 at tables." "Arthur Sterling arrived in town an hour ago. His car is parked near the Central Hotel." "He's preparing too," I said thoughtfully. "Surely he has his own people." "Undoubtedly," Marcus nodded. "But in a public place, they'll have to be cautious, just like us." He handed me a small leather briefcase. "All the documents are here. Originals of Olivia's photos, printouts of bank statements, information on the shell companies, the money flow chart. And something else interesting my friends found." "What exactly?" I asked. "Proof that Lucille Sterling has been leading a double life for the last 3 years." Marcus smiled mysteriously. "She has a lover, a young manager at one of her husband's hotel chains." "Lord," I shook my head. "And she dared to talk about dirty blood." Marcus looked at his watch. "We have to go, Ruby. The meeting is in an hour and a half, and the drive takes about an hour." I walked over to Olivia, who woke up and watched our preparations with anxiety. "We'll handle it." I kissed her forehead. "Everything will be fine." "Be careful," she whispered. "These people, they aren't used to losing." "Neither are we," said Marcus firmly. "Neither are we." We went outside. The evening was cold, with a light fog creeping over the lake. Ideal weather for our mission. Visibility limited, but not enough to be dangerous. In the car, Marcus checked the pistol one more time, then handed me a small box. "What is this?" I opened it and saw a tiny earpiece. "Radio transmitter," he explained. "My guys will be in touch with us. I'll hear them. You'll hear me. If something goes wrong, I'll say the code word sunset. That means leave immediately." I inserted the earpiece and adjusted my scarf to hide it. "And if help is needed?" "The word sunrise," he answered. "And they intervene immediately." The road to the city was deserted. We drove in silence, each immersed in our thoughts. I thought about my daughter left alone in the forest cabin. She was scared, I knew, but she didn't show it. "Everything will be okay, Ruby," Marcus said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. "We thought it all through." "The plan is solid." I nodded, but anxiety didn't let go. Too many unknowns. How would Arthur Sterling react? Would he believe us? What would he do if he believed? The city met us with the bright lights of shop windows and street lamps. After the silence of the forest, the noise of the streets seemed deafening. Marcus parked the car 2 blocks from the diner. "We'll walk," he said. "Safer that way." I gripped the briefcase with the documents tighter and got out of the car. We walked through the evening city like ordinary passers-by, a middle-aged woman and man. No one would guess we were going to a meeting that could change our lives. The Old Park Diner was located on the first floor of a historic building downtown. A cozy place with dimmed lights and quiet music. We entered 15 minutes before the appointed time. "He's already here," Marcus whispered to me, "at the corner table, alone. But his people are at the neighboring tables." I discreetly scanned the room. I recognized Arthur Sterling immediately, a tall, stately man with a strong face and silver temples. He sat thoughtfully stirring his coffee and looked completely calm. Only the whitened knuckles of his fingers betrayed his tension. "I'll go first," said Marcus. "You approach in a minute." He confidently headed toward Arthur Sterling's table. I saw the man tense up when a stranger approached him. 2 bodyguards at the next table also leaned forward, but Marcus simply sat opposite and said something quietly. I gave them a minute, then walked over and sat next to my brother. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," I said calmly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." He looked at me closely. In his cold gray eyes, there was neither hostility nor benevolence, only calculating business interest. "You claim my wife tried to kill your daughter," he said without preamble. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I took the photos of the beaten Olivia out of the briefcase and placed them before him. "This is my daughter, your daughter-in-law. She is pregnant with your grandchild." His face twitched when he saw the photos, but he quickly pulled himself together. "This is terrible," he said in an even voice. "But what makes you think Lucille did this?" Marcus took out a voice recorder and played the recording. Olivia's voice, weak, breaking with pain, but distinct, filled the space between us. "Lucille drove me out of town, said she wanted to show me a new lot. When we got out of the car, she hit me with something heavy, kept repeating about my dirty blood, that I wasn't worthy to be in their family." Arthur Sterling sat motionless, listening to the recording. His face remained impassive, but the muscles in his jaw betrayed internal tension. "Motive," he said when the recording ended. "What motive does my wife have to attack her daughter-in-law? Lucille has always been demanding, but violence—" I put the second folder on the table. "Your wife has been systematically siphoning money from the Hope Foundation over 7 years, about $5 million. A scheme with shell companies." Olivia accidentally discovered the documents and asked an uncomfortable question. Arthur opened the folder. His face remained imperturbable, but I noticed his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped through the pages. Can this be verified? He asked, studying the statements. We already verified it, answered Marcus. These firms exist only on paper, registered to straw men. Money was siphoned offshore. Arthur Sterling remained silent for a long time, studying the documents, then raised his gaze. Suppose this is true. What do you want? Money? Compensation? Justice, I said firmly. And safety for my daughter and grandchild. What kind of justice exactly? His voice became harder. You understand that a public scandal will destroy not only Lucille's reputation, but the business I built for 30 years. We aren't seeking publicity, Marcus answered calmly. We are only interested in Olivia's safety and just punishment for the person who tried to kill a pregnant woman. Arthur tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. And Gavin? Does my son know about this? No, I shook my head, and Olivia isn't sure he should know. She believes he will always be on his mother's side. Something resembling pain flashed in the eyes of this stern man. She's right, he said quietly. My son has always been weak. Lucille made him that way. He fell silent again, immersed in his thoughts, then abruptly looked up. You have something else, don't you? His voice was quiet, but steel rang in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have dared such a meeting. Marcus nodded and took out the third folder. Your wife is leading a double life, Mr. Sterling. She's having an affair with Paul Nichols, the manager of your Riviera Hotel, for 3 years now, and money from the foundation partially went to their joint account in the Cayman Islands. It was a low blow, and we knew it. But we had no choice. We needed to hit him where it hurt, so he would take our side. Arthur took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photos of Lucille and a young man in a restaurant, leaving a hotel, at the airport, and bank statements confirming the joint account. His face turned to stone. He closed the folder and put it on the table. What do you want? He asked dully. Specifically, I leaned toward him, looking him straight in the eyes. Official divorce for Olivia and Gavin with decent compensation. A guarantee of safety for my daughter and future grandchild, and that Lucille never approaches them again. And in return, complete silence, Marcus answered. No police reports, no contact with the press, no public accusations. Everything stays between us. Arthur Sterling looked at us for a long time, as if assessing our resolve. Then he nodded. I agree, with one condition. I will deal with Lucille myself in my own way. Marcus and I exchanged glances. You won't cause her physical harm? I asked. Not that I worried about that woman, but I didn't want more blood on our hands. No, he shook his head, but she will get what she deserves. Believe me, for Lucille, the loss of status, money, and reputation is scarier than any physical pain. Then we have a deal. Marcus extended his hand. Arthur shook it after a second of hesitation. Is Olivia in a safe place right now? He asked, gathering the documents into one pile. Yes, I answered, and she will stay there until everything settles down. Sensible? He nodded. I will contact you in 3 days. By that time, the divorce papers will be ready, and Lucille will cease to be a threat. He stood up, nodded to us, and headed for the exit. The bodyguards immediately rose and followed him. Marcus and I remained at the table, not believing everything went so smoothly. Do you think he'll keep his word? I whispered. I think so, Marcus nodded. People like Arthur Sterling value their word. It's a question of honor. Besides, a scandal isn't profitable for him. I suddenly felt incredibly tired. The tension of the last days fell on my shoulders all at once. Let's go home, said Marcus, noticing my state. Olivia is waiting for news. We left the diner and headed to the car. The city around us lived its usual evening life. People rushed about their business, shop windows glowed, cars drove by. No one suspected that the fate of several families had just been decided. In the car, Marcus contacted his people, made sure we weren't being tailed, and we set off. You did good, sis, he said when we drove out onto the highway. Grandpa would be proud of you. And of you too. I smiled weakly. I wouldn't have managed without you. It's our shared victory. He looked focused on the road, and Olivia's. She showed real courage. I looked out the window at the trees rushing by, black silhouettes against the night sky. Somewhere out there, deep in the woods, my daughter waited. And now I could tell her it was over, that they were safe, she and the baby growing under her heart. Black blood, I said quietly. Lucille despised it so much, but it was that blood that defeated her in the end. Not blood, Marcus objected, but what it gave you: resilience, wisdom, the ability to survive and protect your loved ones no matter what happens. I nodded. He was right. It wasn't about origin, but about what it taught us. To survive where others give up, to see a way out where others see a dead end, and never retreat when it comes to the lives of those we love. We drove through the night, approaching the forest cabin where our story began. I knew everything would be fine now. Not immediately, not easily, but we would manage, as we always had. A week passed, 7 long days filled with waiting and anxiety. Olivia and I stayed in the forest cabin. Marcus visited regularly, bringing food, medicine, and news. My daughter's condition was gradually improving. The bruises began to fade. The pain in her ribs became less acute. She slept a lot, and when she was awake, she sat by the window looking at the lake and stroking her stomach, as if convincing the baby that everything would be okay. On the 3rd day, just as promised, Arthur Sterling contacted us. Marcus met him in the city and returned with documents, a divorce agreement and compensation, as well as news that took my breath away. Lucille Sterling has disappeared, he said, adding logs to the stove. Officially, she went for treatment at a Swiss clinic. But in reality, I asked, glancing at the sleeping Olivia. Arthur gave her a choice. Marcus spoke quietly, not to wake his niece. Either prison for fraud and attempted murder, or voluntary exile. She chose the latter. He allocated her a small sum, small by his standards, of course, and sent her somewhere in South America with the condition that she never returns and never contacts the family. And her lover? I remembered the young hotel manager. Fired, Marcus shrugged. Arthur Sterling is a tough man. He doesn't forgive betrayal. And how did Gavin react? Does he know what happened? He knows, Marcus sighed. But not the full version. Arthur told him his mother committed financial crimes and had to leave. And the attack on Olivia? Not a word. Fears his son won't handle the full truth. I shook my head. The man who couldn't protect his wife from his own mother now didn't even know the whole truth about what happened. But perhaps it was better for everyone this way. Does he want to see Olivia? I asked. No. Marcus looked at his sleeping niece. Arthur said Gavin took the news of the divorce surprisingly calmly. Seems he long ago resigned himself to the fact that their marriage was a mistake. I didn't know whether to rejoice or be sad about this. On one hand, the lack of resistance facilitated the divorce process. On the other, the ease with which Gavin gave up his pregnant wife spoke poorly of him. And what about the foundation? I asked, remembering where it all started. Arthur personally took charge of it, answered Marcus. Conducted an audit, returned the stolen money, changed the management, is trying to minimize reputational damage. On the 4th day, Doc Wallace came to examine Olivia again. He was pleased with her condition. Bones were knitting, bruises healing, the baby developing normally. In a week she can be moved home, he said, packing his bag, but complete rest for another month. On the 7th day, Marcus arrived with important news. Documents signed, he said, handing Olivia a thick folder. Divorce processed expeditiously thanks to Arthur's connections. Compensation transferred to your account. A sum enough for a comfortable life and the child's education. Olivia held the folder on her lap, hesitating to open it. Is that it? She asked quietly. Is it the end? Almost. Marcus sat down next to her. There's one more thing. Arthur wants to meet with you. My daughter and I exchanged glances. We hadn't expected this. Why? She asked warily. He didn't explain. Marcus shrugged. Said only that it's important and it's not a threat. If you agree, he'll come tomorrow. Alone, no security. Olivia thought. mechanically stroking her stomach, a gesture that had become habitual over these days. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll meet him. It's the least I can do after everything he's done for us." Arthur Sterling arrived the next day at exactly noon. We heard the sound of an engine, and Marcus went out to meet him, leaving Olivia and me in the cabin. A few minutes later, the door opened, and a tall, gray-haired man appeared on the threshold in a simple, warm coat, no suit, no security, no usual gloss of a powerful businessman. "Hello, Olivia," he said, standing at the threshold as if hesitant to enter further. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." My daughter nodded, gesturing for him to sit. I started to leave to give them privacy, but Arthur stopped me. "Stay, Ms. Vance. What I want to say concerns you too." He sat on the bench opposite Olivia, folded his hands on his knees. For the first time, I saw in him not a stern businessman, but simply a tired man crushed by the betrayal of loved ones. "I came to apologize," he began, looking Olivia straight in the eye, "for not seeing, not stopping, not protecting. I was blind, too busy with business to notice what was happening in my own family." Olivia was silent, waiting for him to continue. "Lucille has always been a complicated person," he continued, "but I never thought she was capable of such cruelty, especially toward a pregnant woman, the mother of my grandchild." His voice trembled on the last words. I suddenly realized that for this stern man, impending grandfatherhood meant more than one could imagine. "You aren't to blame, Arthur," Olivia said softly. "You couldn't have known." "I should have." He shook his head. "It's my responsibility." He fell silent, gathering his thoughts, then continued. "I came not only to apologize, I would like, if you allow, to remain in the child's life. To be a grandfather." Olivia raised her eyebrows in surprise. None of us expected this. "I understand. It's a strange request after everything that happened," he hurried to add. "I'll understand if you refuse, but I'm 65, and this child is my only chance to continue the line. Gavin is unlikely to ever become a father again. He's too weak for a family." In his words, there was no reproach toward his son, only a sad statement of fact. I suddenly felt strange compassion for this man who had spent so many years building an empire to pass on to heirs who didn't justify his hopes. Olivia was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the frozen lake, then turned to her father-in-law. "I won't deprive the child of a grandfather," she said quietly. "You can see him or her, on the condition that Lucille never appears in our life and that Gavin doesn't pretend to be a loving father occasionally." "Of course," Arthur exhaled with relief, "Lucille will never return. And as for Gavin, I'll talk to him. He must make a choice. Either be a real father or don't interfere at all." He paused, then took an envelope out of the inner pocket of his coat. "One more thing," he said, handing it to Olivia. "These are keys to a house in Pine Creek, not far from here, and the deed in your name." Olivia looked at the envelope in bewilderment. "Why?" "I thought you'd need somewhere to live," Arthur shrugged. "Quiet place, clean air, good for a child, and close enough to the city if work or school is needed." "This is very generous, but—" Olivia began. "Please accept," Arthur interrupted her gently. "Not as compensation. You already receive that by the agreement, but as a gift to my future grandchild." Olivia hesitated. I understood her doubts. Accepting such an expensive gift from a man whose family was associated with so much pain, but at the same time, this house could become a real shelter for her and the baby, a new beginning. "Okay," she finally said. "I accept. Thank you." Arthur nodded, then unexpectedly reached out and lightly touched her stomach. "Boy or girl?" he asked, with unusual softness in his voice. "Don't know yet." Olivia smiled weakly. "It'll be a surprise." "In our family, boys are usually born," he said thoughtfully. "But maybe you're—" What did Lucille call it? "Dirty blood? Maybe it will change the tradition." In his words, there was no contempt or mockery, rather sincere curiosity. My grandmother was Zora Vance, I said, deciding to join the conversation. A smart, strong black woman who commanded respect in a town that didn't want to give it. She taught me a lot. I see. Arthur looked at me closely. That strength passed to you and your daughter. You know, I've always respected people who can stand up for themselves and their loved ones, regardless of race. He stood up, signaling the visit was over. I won't intrude, he told Olivia. When the baby is born and you feel ready, just call. My number is in the documents. Olivia nodded. Thank you for coming, Arthur. He headed for the door, but stopped on the threshold and turned around. You are a brave woman, Olivia, and you have an amazing mother. Take care of each other. With those words, he left. A minute later, we heard the sound of the car driving away. Olivia sat holding the envelope with the keys to the new house. On her face was a strange mixture of emotions: relief, confusion, hope. What do you think? I asked, sitting down next to her. I don't know, she shook her head. Everything is so tangled. A month ago I had a perfect life. At least I thought so. And now you will have a new life. I hugged her by the shoulders, and it might turn out to be much more real. In the evening, when Olivia fell asleep, Marcus and I sat by the dying fire in the stove. Tomorrow, we were to leave the cabin and move Olivia to her new house. Our forced adventure was coming to an end. Do you think Arthur will keep his word? I asked, looking at the flame. About Lucille and Gavin? Think so. Marcus thoughtfully turned a mug of tea in his hands. He's old school. For people like that, their word is everything. And his sudden attachment to the future grandchild. Genuine? Yes. Marcus shrugged. He's not young. His business is successful, but who to pass it to? His son is weak. His wife turned out to be a traitor. The grandchild is the only hope for continuing his life's work. I nodded. His words made sense. For people like Arthur, family and legacy often become more important than money and power, especially at the sunset of life. What will you do next? I asked my brother. Return to your work in the city? Marcus smiled. Not immediately. First, I'll help you settle in the new house. Then I was offered an interesting position in a security firm, more solid than before. I'll be closer to you. What about your bachelor life? I teased him. You know, he suddenly became serious. This story made me rethink a lot. Family, it's the most important thing we have. Grandpa always said that, and we didn't always listen. He threw a log into the stove, and the flame flared up with new force. Speaking of Grandpa, he said after a silence, remember, he always said our roots are our strength? I nodded. Grandpa often repeated that phrase, especially when other kids teased me for my dark skin. He was right. Marcus watched the fire. If not for his lessons, not for his legacy, I don't know how this would have ended. If not for Grandma's blood, I added. The very thing Lucille considered a flaw turned out to be our strength, the ability to survive, protect our own, find a way out in hopeless situations. To black blood, Marcus raised his mug jokingly. To black blood, I echoed. The next morning, we left the cabin. Marcus helped Olivia into the car. I packed our few belongings. Before leaving, I went out to the shore of the frozen lake and looked at the snow-covered forest for a long time. Here, in this wilderness, away from civilization, we survived the hardest period in our lives. Here my daughter healed from wounds inflicted by a woman who should have become a second mother to her. Here my brother and I remembered Grandpa's lessons and used them to protect our family. And from here, we were leaving as winners. I took a deep breath of frosty air and headed to the car. Ahead was a new life for all of us. The house gifted by Arthur turned out to be a large wooden cottage on the outskirts of Pine Creek, 10 miles from town. 2 stories, spacious rooms, modern finishing, a fireplace in the living room. Secluded enough to feel safe, but not so much as to be cut off from the world. It's nice here, said Olivia when we helped her get settled in the bedroom on the first floor. Quiet, calm. For the first time in a long time, peace appeared in her eyes. She put her hand on her stomach, and I noticed a small bump move under her thin sweater. "The baby is pleased too," I smiled. "Yes," she nodded. "I think we'll be happy here." Marcus busied himself with setting up the house, checked the security systems, ordered groceries, helped unpack things. I cooked lunch, glancing out the window at the snow-covered garden. Simple everyday cares after so many days of tension and fear. In the evening, when Olivia fell asleep, I went out onto the veranda. It was slightly freezing. Stars shone in the dark sky. Somewhere far away, in another part of the world, Lucille Sterling was starting her new life. Without money, without status, without family. A just punishment for what she did. And here, in this quiet corner, my daughter was healing her wounds and preparing to become a mother. And I was nearby, ready to support her on this new path. I suddenly remembered Grandma's words, which she often repeated. "Our roads aren't always straight, but they always lead home." We found our home and our strength. 3 months passed. April was blooming outside the window, filling the garden with bright colors of wildflowers. The snow had long melted, exposing the earth ready for new life. Nature was waking up after a long winter, and together with it, Olivia seemed to wake up too. Her physical wounds had healed. The bruises disappeared, the broken bones knit together. Almost no traces of that terrible day remained on her face, but the soul's wounds healed slower. At night she often had nightmares, and I woke up from her quiet crying, rushed to her room, sat nearby, stroked her hair, as in childhood. But the pregnancy was proceeding well. Her belly noticeably rounded, and with every day, Olivia spent more time talking to the baby, reading books to it, playing music. These moments were the only ones when the shadow of the past completely left her face. Marcus bought a small house 2 miles from us, an old forester's lodge he fixed up with his own hands. Now he worked in the state capitol at a large security firm, but every weekend he came to us. We cooked together, walked in the woods, made plans for the future, as if returned to childhood when we were inseparable. We heard nothing of Arthur Sterling all this time. He kept his word, didn't impose, waited for Olivia to be ready to contact him herself. No news of Gavin either. After the divorce, rumor had it he went to Europe, started a new life, and Lucille was not spoken of at all, as if she never existed. Life was gradually improving. Olivia started working remotely. She was a good financial analyst, and her skills turned out to be in demand. I tended to the house, garden, cooked for both of us. A quiet, measured life, almost like before all these terrible events. One April day, when the sun shone especially brightly through the just open leaves, I was working in the garden, planting tomato seedlings in the greenhouse Marcus built for me. Olivia sat nearby in a wicker chair with a laptop on her knees. The last few weeks, she worked a lot on some project. Suddenly she cried out, and I turned sharply, afraid she felt sick. But on her face was not suffering, but surprise. What happened? I rushed to her, wiping my hands on my apron. "It's from Arthur." She turned the laptop screen to me. "An email. He writes that he found documents that might interest me. About Gavin." I frowned. The last thing we needed right now was a return to the past. "What documents? Does he specify?" "No." Olivia shook her head. "Only writes that it's important and might matter for the future child. He wants to meet." "And will you agree?" I asked cautiously. She thoughtfully rubbed her stomach, where the little human was actively kicking. "I think so," she finally said. "He behaved decently all this time, didn't pressure, didn't impose. And if it's really something important for the baby..." I nodded. Over these months, I learned to trust my daughter's intuition. Maternal instinct made her stronger and wiser. "When does he want to meet?" "Suggests this Saturday, at our place." She smiled weakly. "Writes that he'll come alone and understands if we prefer someone else to be present." "I'll call Marcus," I decided. He was planning to come for the weekend anyway. On Saturday, exactly at noon, an inconspicuous silver sedan pulled up to our house. Arthur, as promised, arrived alone. He looked different than at our last meeting, rejuvenated, rested, as if having thrown a heavy load off his shoulders. We met him in the living room. Olivia sat in an armchair, wrapping her legs in a blanket, although the day was warm. Marcus stood by the fireplace, pretending to examine photos on the shelf, but I knew he was watching the guests' every move. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Arthur sat in the chair opposite Olivia. "How are you feeling?" "Good." She put her hand on her already impressive belly. "The doctor says everything is going great, due in 2 months." "Glad to hear." He nodded, and I noticed sincere warmth in his eyes. "Does the house suit you?" "More than." Olivia looked around the spacious living room. "Thank you again." He waved it off. "Don't mention it." Then he took a thick folder in a blue cover out of his briefcase and put it on the coffee table. "I promised not to interfere in your life until you were ready yourself," he began. "And I would have kept that promise if I hadn't discovered these documents." "What is this?" asked Olivia, looking at the folder but not touching it. "Medical records," answered Arthur. "Gavin's and Lucille's, something I myself didn't know until recently." He opened the folder and took out several sheets with seals and stamps of medical institutions. "When you were pregnant 2 years ago, the first time," he spoke slowly, choosing words, "and lost the baby. It wasn't an accident." Olivia turned pale. I involuntarily leaned forward. What was he talking about? "Lucille was slipping you drugs," Arthur continued, looking straight in Olivia's eyes. "Abortifacients, in tea, in food, systematically over several weeks." I heard Marcus sharply intake air. Olivia froze, her face turned whiter than chalk. How do you know?" she whispered. "I found receipts." He pointed to the documents in the folder. "Prescriptions written to straw men, and then hired a private investigator who talked to your former housekeeper. She confirmed Lucille gave her some powders to add to your food, supposedly vitamins." Olivia covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. I rushed to her, hugged her, pressed her to me. "That's monstrous," said Marcus quietly, "even for her." "Yes," Arthur nodded. "I was shocked when I found out, and decided you should know the truth, especially now, when you are expecting a child." "Why?" Olivia raised her tear-stained face. "Why did she do it?" "Because of the inheritance," he answered. "We have a clause in the family trust. The heir gains control over the company only after the birth of his own heir. Lucille didn't want Gavin to become independent of her." He fell silent, then added quietly, "And also, Gavin knew." These 2 words hung in the air like a clap of thunder. Olivia froze in my arms. "Knew?" repeated Marcus. "You mean—" "Yes," Arthur nodded. "He knew his mother was poisoning his wife to cause a miscarriage and did nothing to stop her." "Oh, God," I whispered, hugging my daughter tighter. "How could he?" "I told you he is a weak man," said Arthur bitterly. "Always was, but I didn't think his weakness went that far. I would never—" He stumbled, and for a moment his stern face twisted with pain. "I would never have allowed this to happen if I knew." Olivia slowly freed herself from my embrace. Her face, wet with tears, suddenly became surprisingly calm. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "This explains a lot." She stood up, went to the window. Sunlight outlined her silhouette, emphasizing her round belly. She put both hands on it, as if protecting the child. "I always blamed myself," she said, looking out the window. "Thought I did something wrong, didn't protect it. Doctors said stress, overwork, and it was her, and him." Arthur stood up and approached her, but didn't touch, keeping a distance. "I'm sorry," he said. "So sorry I couldn't protect you then. Didn't see what was happening in my own family." Olivia turned to him, and I saw in her eyes something I hadn't seen for a very long time. Anger. Not despair, not fear, but pure, healthy anger. You aren't to blame, she said firmly. You didn't know, but they... She took a deep breath. They knew, both, and now I know too. She walked over to the table and closed the folder with documents. What do you plan to do with this information? Asked Arthur. Nothing, Olivia shook her head. What can I do? Evidence isn't enough for court. And why? She is already punished, and he will live with this for the rest of his days. She put her hand on her stomach again. I will focus on the future, on my child, on our new life. Arthur nodded. In his eyes flashed something resembling respect. You are a strong woman, Olivia. Stronger than I thought. I have good genes. She threw a glance at me and smiled weakly. Black blood, remember? I remember. He smiled too. And I'll be glad if that blood flows in the veins of my grandchild. It will bring strength to our family. To my family, Olivia gently corrected him. Now this is my family. Me, my child, my mom, my uncle. But you can be part of it if you want. He nodded, accepting her conditions. On his face was an expression I hadn't seen before. Something like gratitude. I want to, he simply said. After he left, we sat in silence. Olivia returned to the chair. Her face was thoughtful, but calm. How are you? Marcus finally asked. Strange, but better, she smiled weakly. As if something cleared up, as if the last piece of the puzzle fell into place. I understood what she meant. Sometimes the scariest thing is the unknown, conjectures, self-accusations. The truth, however painful it might be, sets you free. And what do you think about Arthur? I asked. Are you really ready to let him be part of the child's life? Olivia thought. He's not like them, she finally said. Not like Gavin and Lucille. He has a backbone, honor. Maybe in his own old-fashioned way, but it's there. She looked at me. And then, didn't you teach me that you can't judge a person by their family? That everyone answers only for their own actions? I nodded. Those were my grandmother's words, which I often repeated to my daughter when she faced prejudice. Yes, I taught you, I agreed. And I'm proud you remembered. Besides, added Olivia, stroking her stomach, it won't hurt the baby to have a man nearby whom they can respect, who will show what it means to be strong but fair. Marcus coughed. He already has such a man, he said with feigned offense. I'm his uncle, actually. We laughed, and the tension that held us since Arthur's appearance finally let go. In the evening, when Marcus went to town on business, Olivia and I sat on the veranda. The sunset painted the sky in pink and gold tones. Birds sang in the garden, an idyllic picture that seemed unreal after everything endured. You know, Mom, Olivia suddenly said, I thought of a name for the baby. Yes? I turned to her. And what is it? If it's a boy, Nicholas, in honor of great-grandpa. She smiled. And if it's a girl, Zora, like great-grandma. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Zora. The name of my grandmother, the proud woman who faced down a hateful town for love, whose very blood Lucille had called dirty. Those are beautiful names, I said, squeezing my daughter's hand. They would be proud. I want the child to know their roots, continued Olivia, from both sides, good and bad, strength and weakness, so they can choose what kind of person to become. She looked at the sunset, and gold radiance reflected in her eyes. I was so afraid, Mom. All these months afraid I wouldn't manage alone, wouldn't be able to protect the child from this world. But now I understand. I'm not alone. I have you, Uncle Marcus. Even Arthur, strangely enough. She put her hand on her stomach. And I have strength I didn't even suspect. Strength that manifested when it was needed most. That Vance blood, I smiled. That Vance blood, she echoed. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I'm proud. At that moment, looking at my daughter, illuminated by the setting sun, with her hand on her belly where a new human grew, I thought about our family history, about my grandmother who defied society for love, about my grandfather who taught us to defend ourselves in a world where force is often confused with right, about my brother who came to help in a moment of danger, about Olivia who found the strength to start a new life after betrayal, and about the child who would soon be born, with the blood of warriors and survivors, scouts and freedom-loving souls, with a legacy of strength and resilience, wisdom and justice. In his veins would flow blood they tried to blacken, but we knew this blood wasn't dirty. This blood was gold. On a sunny June morning, I woke up from a phone call. The clock showed 5 o'clock a.m. My heart jumped. Who calls at such an hour? In the receiver, Marcus's excited voice was heard. "Ruby, get ready. Olivia's water broke. I'm already driving to you." I rushed to my daughter's room. She sat on the edge of the bed, pale, with frightened eyes. "Mom, I think it started," she whispered. "Early, 2 weeks before the due date." "It's okay, honey." I tried to speak calmly, although I was worried, no less. 2 weeks is normal. The baby just decided to hurry up. I helped her gather the pre-packed bag, change clothes. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled up. He was collected and businesslike, as always in critical situations. "I arranged with the hospital," he said, helping Olivia into the car. "They're expecting us. Everything will be fine." The road to the city seemed endless. Olivia's contractions came at 10-minute intervals. She bore the pain stoically, only tightly squeezing my hand when another wave rolled in. In the emergency room, we were met by a middle-aged female doctor with kind eyes and decisive movements. "First birth?" she asked, helping Olivia into a wheelchair. "Yes," answered my daughter, wincing in pain. "Everything will be fine," said the doctor confidently. "Mom can come with you to the delivery room if you want." Olivia looked at me gratefully, and I nodded. Marcus remained in the hallway. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was his pale face and a thumbs up. Everything will be fine. The labor was hard. 14 hours of contractions, screams, pain, tears. I held my daughter's hand, wiped sweat from her forehead, spoke words of support. Seeing her suffering was unbearable, but I knew this was necessary pain, pain that would lead to new life. At 7 o'clock p.m., the first cry of the newborn rang out, piercing, furious, alive. "A girl!" announced the midwife, lifting a small creature covered in blood. "A healthy, strong girl." I watched them lay the granddaughter on Olivia's chest, how my daughter, exhausted but happy, touched the tiny face with trembling fingers. "Zora," she whispered. "My little Zora." In the hallway, not only Marcus was waiting for us. To my surprise, Arthur was there too, with a huge bouquet of white roses and a bewildered expression on his face. "Marcus called me," he explained, seeing my surprise. "I hope you don't mind." I shook my head. He had the right to know about the birth of his granddaughter. "A girl," said Marcus, hugging me. "What did they name her?" "Zora," I answered, watching Arthur's reaction, "in honor of my grandmother." He raised his eyebrows in surprise, but then smiled. A rare, sincere smile that completely transformed his stern face. "Zora Sterling," he said thoughtfully. "Unusual for our family, but beautiful." "Just Zora," I shook my head. "Olivia decided to give her our last name, Vance." He was silent, then nodded. "I understand, and approve." Marcus put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that 3 months ago would have seemed unthinkable. "Congratulations, Grandpa," he said with a smile. "You have a beautiful granddaughter." 2 days later, Olivia and the baby were discharged home. Zora turned out to be a calm baby, ate well, cried rarely, slept a lot. Only her eyes, when she opened them, were surprisingly knowing for a newborn. Dark, attentive, as if she already understood everything about this world. Life revolved around the little human. Sleepless nights, diapers, feedings, first smiles. Marcus became a frequent guest, brought gifts, helped around the house, could sit for hours next to the crib, telling the little one amazing stories about distant countries where he happened to visit. Arthur came once every 2 weeks, Always warned in advance, never stayed long, brought expensive gifts, but never tried to impose his will or interfere in upbringing. Gradually, his visits became a habitual part of our life. Summer that year turned out hot. In August, when Zora turned 2 months old, we spent most of the day on the veranda. Olivia read books, I knitted tiny socks for my granddaughter. The baby slept in the shade of a spreading apple tree. One day, as we sat like that, an unfamiliar car pulled up to the house. A young man in an expensive suit got out. I tensed. We weren't expecting guests. Olivia turned pale, recognizing him. "Gavin," she whispered. I instinctively moved closer to the stroller with the baby. After everything we learned about him, his appearance didn't bode well. He walked up to the veranda, stopped a few steps from us. He looked unwell, thinner with circles under his eyes, nervous. "Hello, Olivia," he said quietly. "Ms. Vance." "What do you need?" I asked directly, not wasting time on greetings. He winced, but didn't argue. "I wanted to see the child." He nodded toward the stroller. "Father said I have a daughter." Olivia stood up, blocking the stroller with herself. "Why?" Her voice was cold. "What do you care about her?" "I'm her father." He took a step forward but stopped, seeing the expression on Olivia's face. "Father?" She laughed bitterly. "A father protects his children. A father doesn't let anyone harm them. And you knew your mother was poisoning me so I'd lose our first child. And did nothing." He turned pale, lowered his head. "I didn't know how to stop her," he whispered. "She always got what she wanted." "You could have told me." Olivia paused between words, as if each was difficult for her. "Warned me, protected me, but you chose her, as always." He was silent, and this silence was more eloquent than any excuses. "Leave," said Olivia quietly. "You have no daughter. Zora has no father. It will be better for her this way." "Olivia, please." He raised eyes full of tears to her. "I've changed. I don't talk to my mother anymore. I went through therapy. I want to fix mistakes, be part of my child's life." She looked at him for a long time, studying him, then slowly shook her head. "No, Gavin. Too late. Too much pain. I can't trust you with our daughter, and I don't want her to grow up with such an example of a man before her eyes." He clenched his fists, and for a moment I was afraid he would do something irreparable. But then his shoulders slumped, and he nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "But if you ever change your mind, I'll be waiting." He turned and walked to the car. Olivia watched him go, and in her eyes there was neither hatred nor love, only fatigue and detachment. When the car disappeared around the bend, she sank onto the chair next to me and took my hand. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked quietly. "You did what you thought necessary to protect your child," I answered. "No one has the right to judge you for that." Zora stirred in the stroller, and Olivia leaned over to her, adjusting the blanket. The baby looked at her mother with wide open eyes, dark as night, like my grandmother Zora's. "You know, Mom," said Olivia thoughtfully, not taking her eyes off her daughter, "I used to always think strength was something loud, heroic deeds, bold decisions, loud words." She stroked Zora's tiny palm, and the baby tightly grasped her finger. "But now I understand that real strength is often quiet. It's daily small decisions. The choice to protect those you love, the ability to start over when it seems life is destroyed." I looked at my daughter, at her calm, confident face, and pride overwhelmed me. She went through betrayal, violence, pain, and came out stronger, wiser, whole. "That's Vance blood," I smiled, repeating the phrase that had turned from an insult into a symbol of strength and resilience for us. "Yes." Olivia lifted Zora into her arms, and now it flows in her, in a new generation, in my daughter, who will never be ashamed of her roots. Autumn arrived unnoticed, coloring the leaves in gold and crimson. Zora grew, becoming more curious and active every day. At 3 months, she already confidently held her head up, followed moving objects with her gaze, smiled when spoken to. Facial features were gradually emerging: high cheekbones, dark eyes, a stubborn little chin. More and more often I noticed in her a resemblance to my grandmother, whose name she bore. One day in late September, when the first frosts were already silvering the grass in the mornings, Arthur arrived. He brought, as usual, gifts. This time, a handmade wooden rocking horse that was still too big for Zora to grow into, he said, looking tenderly as Olivia fed the baby. Very soon she'll start walking. We sat in the living room, drank tea with apple pie I baked in the morning. The conversation flowed leisurely, touching on safe topics: the weather, plans for winter, Zora's health. Gavin came by, Olivia suddenly said, not raising her eyes from her daughter. A month ago. Arthur tensed. I didn't know, he said after a pause. What did he need? To see Zora, answered Olivia. I refused. He nodded, accepting her decision. He is my son, he said slowly. But I won't ask you to let him into your life. It's your right to decide. Thank you, said Olivia quietly. I appreciate that. She handed the sleeping Zora to me, and I carried the baby to the crib. When I returned, Olivia and Arthur were talking about something serious. I'm leaving, he said, to Switzerland. Doctors found heart problems. Need surgery. For long? I asked, sitting down next to my daughter. Don't know, he shrugged. A month, maybe longer. Everything depends on how the surgery and rehabilitation go. He took a folder with documents out of his briefcase and put it on the table. I updated my will, he said, looking at Olivia. Zora is my sole heir. My entire estate, business, real estate, everything will pass to her after my death, and until her coming of age, you will manage these assets as a trustee. Olivia raised her eyebrows in amazement. But you have a son. Gavin will receive a fixed allowance, said Arthur firmly. Enough for a comfortable life, but no more. He proved he is incapable of managing the family business. Olivia shook her head. I can't accept this. It's too much. You can, and you will. For the first time in our acquaintance, notes of the former powerful businessman sounded in his voice. This is not discussed. I made a decision. He softened, seeing the expression on Olivia's face. Listen, this isn't charity. This is my choice. I want my legacy to continue, for my life's work to pass into reliable hands. I see strength in you that Gavin always lacked. And I know you will raise Zora so she is worthy of this legacy. Olivia was silent for a long time, then slowly nodded. Okay, but with one condition. Which? I want you to return, alive and healthy. Zora needs a grandfather. His face softened. In his eyes appeared something I had never seen before. Tenderness. I promise, he said. After he left, Olivia and I sat in silence. The sun was setting, painting the room in golden tones. From the nursery came the quiet breathing of sleeping Zora. Strange how everything turned out, said Olivia thoughtfully. A year ago, I was afraid of these people, considered them enemies. And now, life is unpredictable. I took her hand. And people, too. Can't judge a book by its cover, as Grandma used to say. Olivia smiled. I miss her so much. Pity she can't see her great-granddaughter. She sees, I was sure of it. And she is proud of you both. From the nursery came a quiet cry. Olivia got up to go to her daughter, but stopped on the threshold and turned to me. You know, Mom, I'm grateful for everything that happened, even for the pain, for the betrayal, for the fear. Without that, I wouldn't have become who I am now, and I wouldn't have Zora. I watched her walk to her daughter, slender, self-confident, with her head held high. I remembered the frightened, broken woman I found in the woods that cold autumn evening, and understood she was right. Sometimes we need to pass through darkness to see the light. Sometimes pain is not the end, but a beginning. Sometimes what others consider our flaw turns out to be our greatest strength. Black blood. The blood of survivors, the blood of the resilient, the blood of those who don't give up. Blood that was subjected to persecution for centuries, but always found a path to freedom. Blood they tried to despise, but which turned out stronger than prejudice and hatred. This blood flows in my granddaughter's veins, and it will never be dirty. It will be her strength, her legacy, her pride, and we, me, Olivia, Marcus, even Arthur, will be nearby to protect her, teach her, love her. So she never forgets who she is and where she came from. So she always knows, in her veins flows the blood of winners. If you liked the story, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. This motivates us to create new and interesting stories every day. Don't miss the new video that you see right now on the main screen. All the best and be happy.